Welcome, everyone, to the Over Under Movies podcast, the show where we take a prominent film or franchise and ask the simple question, are they overrated or are they underrated? I am joined, as always, by my illustrious co-host, DeAngelis.
Howdy, Jason.
Howdy. We are also joined by a special guest today. They are the Billy Cranston to my Jason Lee Scott. It's Billy Ambrose.
Whoa. Hello. That's a great name you got there, Billy. Perfect for this episode.
Yes, yeah. There were a couple times during the movie where I have like an instinctual reaction to people saying my name, because unless you're watching something from like the 1950s or 60s, Billy's not terribly common. Mm-hmm. So it's like, Billy. Me?
Yes, I know that feeling, though not from this movie, because the character of Jason was replaced at this point.
R.I.P. Jason.
As we are alluding to in this intro, today we are talking about a very special movie that I know all three of us love. It's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, the 1995 superhero film based on the popular long-running Power Rangers franchise. So, Billy, you wanted to come on here and talk about this today. Can you tell us why you were interested in talking about this one?
Yeah, this movie is actually like insanely special to me and my sister. When we were growing up, we had the VHS at our grandparents' house. We spent a lot of our time at our grandparents' house. And every time we were there, we would watch this movie. Like, that VHS is worn out. So, like, even before you approached me, like, there are lines in this movie that have already entered my general lexicon. So I remember you were like, hey, we're doing Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And I'm like, oh, done. Easy, yeah. 100%. I love this movie.
Good. Us too. What about you, Dylan? What's your background with this movie?
Yeah, I feel like we throw the word nostalgia around a lot on this podcast, and I don't know if there's a singular movie that evokes more nostalgia for me personally than this movie in particular. I had a very similar situation growing up where my family had the VHS for this movie. My poor mom, I forced her to watch this movie with us like all the time. One of my earliest childhood memories is like doing cartwheels around our living room saying, I'm Tommy the White Power Ranger. Like, this movie, it's very, very difficult for us to judge it subjectively. Objectively.
Yeah.
Like, objectively, this movie is not considered to be a very good movie.
No.
But, like, subjectively, I know, Jason, you gave it a 5-star rating. I watched it a couple nights ago.
Oh, I forgot to log this on my letterbox for today.
And we're going to get into this whole podcast is going to be us just, like, glazing up this movie.
Yeah.
For the sake of, like, overrated, underrated, it's a very interesting movie to talk about because, yeah, this is one of those movies where if you're somebody who was a kid growing up and you love Power Rangers, this is, like, your favorite fucking movie ever, and nobody can tell you shit about, you know, the action is clunky or the CGI looks bad. Or
it's not a bug, it's a feature.
Yeah.
That is part of why I love this movie.
Yeah, everything that's great about this movie is also great about the Power Rangers television series. Mm-hmm. It is super campy. It's super fast-paced. There's not a lot of, like, plot that happens in this movie to speak of. It goes super fast. It is an hour and 28 minutes to credits, baby, which is freaking amazing. We saw, like, how short it was, and we were like, I knew this is my favorite movie. It's so short. Shout out, by the way, to whoever uploaded this movie in its entirety on YouTube. Anybody that's watching this podcast on YouTube right now, you can watch Mighty Morphin Power Rangers the movie on YouTube, start to finish, which is hilarious because it's not on like Amazon or like any of the other streamers right now. I guess whoever owns the rights to this right now, they don't have it like on Netflix or anything like that right now.
Yeah, I found a copy.
Oh, word.
And at the beginning, it had like an HBO bumper. But as if like someone had DVR'd it while it was broadcasting on HBO, because it gave like the mild violence warning, like viewer discretion advised. Because
no, those are the best types of movies to watch. Yeah. It's like that for the Star Wars Holiday Special. If you ever get a copy of the Star Wars Holiday Special, it's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. Like, they don't make originals of that anymore. So you're always like watching some like shitty like bootleg ripoff of the original film.
It's the sacred Jedi text.
Yeah, exactly. It gives
us generation to generation.
Yeah, there's like a certain like novelty to it from watching in that state. I know, Jason, you're also, obviously you have the Power Ranger shirt.
Yes.
I know both of us are giant Power Rangers fans. I don't know, are we doing, we did a podcast on the 2017 Power Rangers film as well, with our friend King from the Thirsty Nerds podcast. I don't know. Are we doing this one first or that one first? I know we're releasing them like back to back.
We'll decide later.
So it's possible that other one is out already. You know, feel free to check our feed. If not, come back in a week. What is it about this film for you though? Like, you gave it a 5-star rating. Both of us we're having a great old time watching this film together. And listen, it holds up, right?
It does.
What makes it hold up so much for us, like now in our 30s watching this?
I think just everything about this feels really memorable to me, probably because similar to you guys, I wore out that VHS. So I pretty much had a lot of these lines memorized. A lot of the lines are like genuinely so funny. Everything that Ivan Ooze says
Oh my God.
is so charismatic. He's got great one-liners. And then the soundtrack is like banger after banger. Dylan, I know you talk about this a lot, but there's not a lot of movies that open with a completely needless skydiving sequence that goes right into a
Rollerblading sequence.
That's what I wrote.
Nothing more 90s.
Yeah, it's like the quintessential 90s action movie mixed with cool Japanese superheroics. It's a cool blend of a lot of stuff that you just don't get nowadays. So 5 stars.
Yeah, no, I wrote pretty much the same. It immediately sets the tone perfectly. It gives you a crawl, which I do not remember from my childhood.
It's just like Star Wars.
Because it's boring, but it says centuries ago, an interdimensional being known as Zordon came to the city of Angel Grove. The logo appears in a flash of lightning, and then it blows up, and then we're skydiving.
We're skydiving to a Red Hot Chili Pepper song.
It's so awesome.
Going into rollerblading with Free Ride by the Edgar Winter Group. Now it's like, oh, this is the perfect film.
It would be very interesting to get like some sort of like control group viewer for us here to see like how does like a normal person view this movie.
I mean, I tried like putting myself in those shoes, and it's like, this is like, even if you're going into it like this is so bad it's good, like I feel like it's still very funny.
Yeah.
Because like you said, Ivan Ooze, like I love that he does silly little voices because he's like, oh, where's my autograph book?
Yeah, he's been sealed away for like what 6,000 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And he's just rattling off one-liners like crazy.
Yeah.
I missed the Brady Bunch reunion.
Yeah. Like, apparently when he was in his like egg underground, he was aware of everything the entire time.
Yeah, he operates with like the same type of knowledge and logic as Genie from Aladdin.
Yeah,
Where he's doing like De Niro impressions and stuff.
Very much the same vibes, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Before we just continue to gush about this movie, Billy, can you give us a summary of like what this movie is about?
Yes. So, as I mentioned, this movie is about an interdimensional being named Zordon who comes to the city of Angel Grove, and he bestows 6 teenagers with the ability of the Power Rangers, and they're like these magic superhero defenders of the planet, I guess.
Yeah,
the whole planet, not just Angel Grove. Don't know what's so special about Angel Grove.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time in that area in particular, but they defend the whole planet.
It's everywhere. And some construction workers one day very nonchalantly unearth this cosmic ancient evil known as Ivan Ooze, who is the most charismatic villain since I don't know, Darth Vader? Is he charismatic enough?
I think you're right. I think Ivan Ooze is the greatest cinematic villain since Darth Vader.
It has to be. And literally, it's just stop Ivan Ooze.
Mm-hmm.
That's the plot. They give you a lot of preamble, and then
the setup of the film, and one of the notable differences between this film and the 2017 film is that the new Power Rangers, the Power Rangers reboot, is like an origin story of the Power Rangers. It's our main team getting their powers, and by the end of the film, it's like you finally get to see them in their suits with their Zords, like fighting a bad guy. This movie glosses over all of that stuff. It starts with them already as the Power Rangers, and this takes place after the first like 2 or 3 seasons of the main show, right? Mm-hmm. Even though you're telling me this film takes place basically in its own continuity, it's not directly tied to the show.
That's right.
So, you know, it's its own like wholly unique plot, even though it's using the same actors and characters and everything. The setup, however, though, is that Ivan Ooze like destroys Zordon's like home base, and Zordon's dying because he's out of his like time loop or whatever that's like keeping him alive.
His juice.
And the Power Rangers lose their powers because of that. And in order to fight Ivan Ooze, they need their powers. So they go to this far-off planet that has this great power, and they have just enough energy. Luckily, thank God, they have just enough energy to get them to the planet, but it can't get them back. So they need to get the great power from this planet. So they go through, trials and tribulations to get their Jedi powers, their ninja Zords.
With the help of Xena Princess Warriors.
Yeah.
We said the same thing.
Yeah, with the help of every young boy's sexual awakening. From
Dulcia, I wrote. I think that's her name. She looks like she's from an entirely different movie.
It really does.
They're like, listen, this movie's rated PG, but how little clothing can we give this woman when she shows up on screen?
I know, this poor woman. I was like... There's like a very clear point where they stopped shooting in, it kind of looked like Iceland where they were shooting. I wasn't sure. Like the rock formations, like the Death Stranding-y kind of hexagonal rock formations. It looks like they were on location, and then there's a point where they get to like the bonfire, and it's like, oh, we're at a studio now. I was like, thank God. That poor girl.
It looks like
it's been freezing.
Yeah, it looks like a tribal council set from Survivor.
And they fight an impressively puppeteered Triceratops skeleton dinosaur that I forgot about and then remembered. And I was like, oh, these effects.
Yeah, this movie has a really good mix.
Popped off.
Yeah, it has a really good mix of like strong practical effects and really bad CGI. That's like it perfectly encapsulates a 90s action movie.
Yeah, a lot of the props and things in this looked great. Like when we were watching it and we saw Ivan Ooze's stupid egg, I was like, whoa, this looks amazing. This looks like it's right out of Aliens. But then when we were watching, that final Zord sequence, it looked terrible, but also amazing still.
But it's for the time, like... No, it still wasn't very good for the time.
Yeah, I remember I rewatched this film in college, and that was the first time I realized, like, oh, this is bad CGI. Like, it's something I never picked up on as a kid, obviously.
I literally wrote down those poor CG artists.
Yeah.
Because they're not setting themselves up for success. Like, even when they're shooting, the design is like reflective chrome. So, like, they have to try to give off the illusion of reflections and reflected light. And it's like, we're not there yet.
Yeah, and the first time you see Ivan Ooze's like Zords, it's in daytime, and I was just like, oh no, they need to get this tonight real fast.
Yeah, it got a little bit more palatable when we get to nighttime, but it's still like
Yeah, the film does like a hard cut in like 6 hours have passed, and now it's nighttime.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot to like about this movie. Billy, what's your experience with like Power Rangers as a franchise? Did you watch the show when you were a kid?
Yeah, I would dabble in the shows, but nothing religiously. I wouldn't keep up with it totally, but if it was on, I would catch it. My sister and I would watch this movie all the time. And then we kind of tapered off. What did I get into instead? I was really into cartoons. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Danny Phantom started to fill the void that this show was occupying. So I started to depart. I had friends and neighbors who collected a lot of Power Ranger stuff. And I always thought it was cool, but this movie was kind of like my Bible. Yeah. But then I never really ventured outside of it, save for the 2017 film that I've only watched it once. So that doesn't match the level of adoration that I have for this movie in particular.
Right.
So I'm sorry to say that this is kind of like my Power Rangers lifeboat.
No, I would kind of agree with you. I feel like a lot of people are in that same group where this movie was both like the pinnacle of their Power Rangers fandom and also like the send-off point for a lot of folks. I've talked to a lot of people that have said like this is where they kind of stopped like watching the Power Rangers is after you get out of that original cast of like the Mighty Morphin crew. Mm-hmm. They didn't stick with it through the power of 30 plus seasons have come since then. I mean, you know more about Power Rangers than probably any of us here at this table, probably. Jason. Like, would you say like objectively this film was the pinnacle for the entire franchise, or was there like another high point? Was there like a multiverse moment that happened that like outshines
this? There was a recent one, right?
The show continued up until 2023, so it ran for 30 years. I would say that this is my personal high point, and probably in terms of like the franchise's ability to make money, I think this was the high point as well. It had like 3 solid years of being like a multi-million to billion-dollar franchise, and after that, it was sold to different studios for less and less money as a franchise. Creatively, there were other high points. So a couple of years later, there was a season called Power Rangers in Space, which is the end of the Zordon era, where the Red Ranger in that series has to kill Zordon in order to release a wave of good energy to destroy all evil in the universe, or cleanse all evil in the universe.
Incredible.
His tube gets shattered, and this blast goes out, and you see, like, all the past villains turn into good humans. And that was supposed to end the franchise, but then it did so well on TV that they brought it back for another season. And then another high point recently is the comic book reboot. They just did or actually many years ago now, but they did a storyline called The Shattered Grid, which is a multiverse storyline. It's about what if Tommy stayed evil after getting brainwashed, and like he gets unbrainwashed, but is like, I'm going to be evil anyway. And he takes over his universe and sets his sight on the normal Power Rangers universe. It's the Power Rangers.
The Power Ranger who laughs.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the Power Rangers have to split their timeline into different pocket dimensions. I don't really remember why, but then they have to team up with all the Power Rangers from like 25 seasons at that point, and it's pretty cool. It was like the end game of Power Rangers.
That is the plot of Kingdom Hearts.
It is kind of like Kingdom Hearts.
The worlds become shattered and disconnected. You got to go from each one, and everyone comes together and defeats the friend turned foe.
I don't know. You're really underselling the plot of Kingdom Hearts here. I don't have to show you.
Oh, same.
There's my Kingdom Hearts 3 crack display.
Keep it right there.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
So we both have Kingdom Hearts tattoos.
We got some real ones here.
Nothing when it comes to like storytelling that makes no sense. Nothing compares to Kingdom Hearts.
Oh yeah, I just meant the first game.
No, the first game. Yeah, the first game
generally.
The first game is pretty like
Simple.
It's somewhat coherent.
Yeah.
Simple and clean.
The sequels, it's a whole different thing. You need to watch several hours of YouTube videos to get on track with what's going on in that series.
I love it. But we're talking about Power Rangers.
Right. It'd be cool to see the Kingdom Hearts team up with Power Rangers. Like,
Yeah, what kind of licensing deal has to go on for that to... Because it was Saban.
yeah. Right now, Hasbro owns the rights to Power Rangers.
That makes sense.
But, you know, Fox had it for a while, and Fox got sold to Disney, so if things worked out differently, it could have happened. Anyway.
So what do you think about them introducing this film with the Power Rangers already being the Power Rangers? Because for people like us, it's great, right? Because it's just like you're watching a 90-minute episode of the television show, basically. But if you're somebody who doesn't know who these characters are, it feels like you're kind of getting like dropped into the middle of things, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of setup. One of the major criticisms I saw from like film critics looking at this film is like all the Power Rangers together, all 6 of them are basically one character. Throughout this film, there's not much like individuality happening here. There's not like a romance side plot between Kimberly and Tommy. There's not like a side plot of Adam feeling like he doesn't like, live up to the other Power Rangers or something like that. There's nothing like that.
No.
They're just the 6 Power Rangers. At the beginning of the film, they skydive, they rollerblade, they fight some goons. And that is the same characters they are at the end of this movie. Not much like major character development or, tribulations are happening here exactly. They kind of win every fight they go through.
Yeah, I wrote, I don't think the Red Ranger had any lines. Because
that's great.
I remember Billy has some lines, because there was one line that I thought was hilarious where Kimberly is like backhand springing away from a group of enemies, and then you hear Billy from off screen, right behind you, Kimberly, and then he comes into frame also backhand springing. And they both just backhand spring away. And then the Black Ranger, he has, I'm a frog. Iconic line followed by Dulcia saying, well, you can kiss a frog and he'll turn into a prince. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't help in combat. So the fact remains.
So the Frog Zord was very helpful in the fight.
Yeah, he's
with
like
its electric tongue.
Him and Tommy are like the only ones who really do anything in that fight. He holds it down. Well, is it the blue one that's a wolf? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he bites off the tail.
Yeah,
so three of the 3, so 50%. But yeah, Aisha has a couple lines. Kimberly and Tommy definitely have lines.
But if you're asking what happens more in this film, like total spoken lines of dialogue between the Rangers, not in their suits, or the number of unnecessary flips and handsprings they do while in their suits. The flips and the handsprings probably win.
This might, I don't think anyone's counted. I Googled and I couldn't find anything. I think this might have the world record for most flips in a film.
Yeah, it's an insane amount of flips.
I tried to look it up and all the results were like, oh, character flips and plot flips as like a synonym for twist, I guess.
That's stupid.
But no, they are.
There's a point in one of the fights where they need to regroup, and so they all just start doing back handsprings.
Yeah.
Until they're all grouped up together again, which I don't know. This might not be the best way. Maybe just run to a spot.
Yeah, they don't run, and also 90% of the hits in this film are kicks.
Yeah.
They love kicks, and very seldom do they punch.
Yeah.
Or use another weapon. And if they do use another weapon, it breaks within 2 or 3 hits. There's like an internal logic they seem to be working on. And for some fights, I can understand. Like they fight those rock monsters. It's like, okay, you don't want to punch those. You'll break your hand. You want to kick those. But like the jelly monsters, it's like just, I don't know.
Yeah, they do punch one and then like crush his chest.
Yeah.
And then there's the ooze on his fist. Yeah, talking about the action and violence, I do think the action was like pretty well choreographed.
Yeah.
Pretty well edited. And then it was like also kind of hyper violent. Sometimes they would kick those jelly guys into walls and those guys would explode.
Yeah, specifically that fight always stuck out to me when I was a kid, and even now after just watching it. There's one point where 2 of the Rangers like kick one of the jelly monsters' head at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it's literally just 2D animation where his eyes like pop out of his head.
Yeah, it's great. There's really great sound effects too during the fights. Yeah, you really sell it. But it's something that like I can really appreciate after watching this movie, having like, you know, been someone who watches a lot of action films in general, is that it's very clear that these actors knew how to do fight choreography. Mm-hmm. They weren't stuck having to edit around actors that didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
They didn't need to only do the fight scenes with stunt doubles in the Power Rangers costumes. They could use the normal actors and like be able to like keep like fairly long shots of them doing like kicks and punches without having to cut around and you know not show their face because it's a stunt double or something like that. It's really well done, and it's a kudos to those actors for like putting in the time and like actually learning like the martial arts behind it. Because, you know, in the television show, like, you know, it's kind of cheesy at times, right? They're fighting like the putty people. It's just, it's camp. It's pure camp. But in this movie, there's like some like legit fight choreography happening. And there are so many fight scenes in this movie. I mean, does 10 minutes go by in this film without a fight scene?
I don't think so.
No, but you're not paying to watch the Power Rangers talk to each other. You're paying for fight scenes.
Yeah, we don't need character development. There was one point during that jelly monster fight where Kimberly, she like kicks one of them into the air and he's horizontal and she keeps kicking him upwards until he hits the ceiling and then goes like boom, boom. And I was like, that was amazing.
Yeah. Now, there are multiple times in this movie where Tommy does a kick while horizontal for a solid like 30 seconds, just repeatedly kicking a dude.
He does, the bicycle kick, which is like a move from Mortal Kombat where he's going kick, 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 kick. And then he also does a corkscrew kick. Where he's spinning down and kicks them with both legs.
Which just looks like good wire work. Like it's all in camera. So yeah, again, well done.
Yeah, this movie definitely, I mean, you can see the influences from like the Japanese show because there's a ton of like Eastern sort of martial arts movements and wire work in here that like you don't really see in Western movies still today.
Especially when they're like they're powering up their Zords. It kind of reminds me of like the jutsus from Naruto where they're doing like hand movements and poses and stuff. I could be mistaken, but with some of the shows, they just take footage that they shot in Japan with Japanese actors when they're in the suits and they just dub over it and then they shoot their little white people parts for the American audiences. So like I thought maybe they were doing some of that here, but I scrolled through all of the credits and it's just them. Yeah. They're just doing a good job.
So yeah, in the original show, and for most of its 30 seasons, they were adapting a Japanese show called Super Sentai. So every time They were in the suits. That was Japanese footage that they would dub over. For this movie, they made the suits. They were new suits, not from the show. They had to do everything from scratch for the first time. And so for the show, they saved tons of money by just buying that footage and dubbing over it.
Yeah.
For this, they had a significant budget. I think it was like $15 million, which was pretty good for the time for what this was.
35.
And yeah, they just made everything from the ground up. And I think it worked out really good.
I'm sure it made a decent amount of money. I had the VHS. You guys had a VHS, so like I'm sure at least in home video sales they must have recouped.
Yeah, it made $66.4 million at the box office, so it quadrupled its budget.
Yeah.
That's really solid. And then I think you're right. VHS sales must have been great. There was a video game based off this movie. There was a comic book series based off this movie. And then I'm sure that it also led to a bump in the TV viewing.
I'm sure a lot of toy sales. I know, I got a White Ranger Halloween costume from this movie, so I'm sure the merchandise was like crazy from this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this thing was a cash cow. It turned Chaim Saban into a billionaire, like this franchise.
I believe it.
Yeah. So we all like this movie. Critics did not like this movie. Dylan, I know you did research, but Billy, do you have a guess at what the Rotten Tomatoes score is for this?
I didn't see Rotten Tomatoes. I did see the Metacritic was in the 40s. And I know Rotten Tomatoes is on a more extreme scale, so I want to say it's probably a little lower than 40. 30s?
Yep, it's got a 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. Very low. It says, for better and for worse, too often the latter, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, captures the thoroughly strange aesthetic of the television series that inspired it. And that's one of the more generous review snippets that I have here. Why do you think this movie didn't seem to pull that well with like professional movie reviewers?
You know, I think, like I said, like this movie is kind of like a perfect distillation of like 90s films and those cheesy B movies. I think probably by 95 they had a decent amount of those already. And this was kind of like a drop in the bucket of that camp, cheesy, people in costumes with poor CG and explosions. And I know Dennis Rodman had an entire career just doing movies like that. So well-tread territory, people who don't care about the franchise, who are like, well, why should I care? I don't know who any of these people are. I don't know who Zordon is. I don't care that he's dying. Alpha's a little annoying. Voiced by Richard Horowitz, I want to say, or Richard Horvitz. I can never remember his last name, but he's Billy from Billy and Mandy.
Oh.
And he's Invader Zim. He has like I was like, I know that voice. Who is that? And I was like,
yeah, I could hear that.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I think that would probably be it. It's cheesy, it's campy, and I also think maybe the so bad it's good phenomenon is more of a post-2000s thing, maybe a post-The Room world, I would say. So I think that would also be it, where it's like, well, if it's not good, then it's not good, period.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing, is that I don't think this movie is thought of by people that like this movie. They don't think of it in the way that people like The Room. The people don't see it as like, this movie's so bad it's good. They just think it's like actually good. They actually like the film. And so because of that, the people that don't like this movie, the people like movie critics that are not fans of the franchise, they're going to poke holes like all over the place in this movie, like things that we find to be like charming about it, and elements that are like callbacks to the television show, and like things that we, loved when we were kids. If you're just like a movie critic just sitting down for a screening ready to like, look at this like critically, there's places you can poke some holes. Let's be honest here. We didn't talk at all about the side plot of this film that takes place back on Earth.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I was going to say.
With the kid, and Ivan Ooze is basically brainwashing all of the parents of Angel Grove into becoming his like construction workers to unbury his like monster Zord things that are in the ground, and then the kids have to like get their parents to not jump off a cliff because Ivan Ooze is done with them.
And in a weirdly intense sequence,
yeah,
like they're stopping their parents from jumping off
from mass suicide.
Mass suicide. And they're like begging with their parents to stand there, pushing them, and they're trying to keep them. The kids spraying water on them.
Yeah, this is after an intense monorail sequence where a piece of the monorail gets destroyed. which is definitely not a miniature. That was definitely a full-scale monorail in that scene.
Yeah.
With the Tommy and his Falcon Zord having to like bridge the monorail for them. Mm-hmm. This movie does a lot of cutting back and forth between like the Power Ranger storyline and the Earth storyline. And the pacing is like, it's really fast. Like, I don't think they linger on like one of those two sides more than like 5 minutes or so ever. And so as a kid, you probably love that because it's fast paced. I mean, it's the same idea as like why kids love TikTok, right? Because it's fast paced and you can just like get your dopamine. You just keep swiping through. You don't want like long takes. This is not a Scorsese movie, right? We're not sitting here for 3.5 hours, in this like atmospheric cinematic like
Martin Scorsese's The Power Rangers.
Yeah, it would be a very different movie.
Extremely violent, but yeah, no, there's something to be said about the screenwriting in this movie, and it's weird to talk about the screenwriting of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but it has a certain, I don't want to say self-awareness, but things just happen because they happen, and if you're not okay with that, the film is going to leave you behind. Like the kid's dad, we talked about that subplot where they're getting brainwashed. He walks into his house, he sees the ooze on the counter, opens it,
he sticks his whole bear claw into the
and then immediately is brainwashed. And I laughed.
And you're like, that's a thing a guy would do.
And if you're sitting there getting hung up on like, well, why would he do that? That doesn't make any sense. Like a normal film critic would.
Yeah.
The film is already 2 scenes ahead of you.
Yeah, the film's like, hey, nobody gives a shit about those questions, buddy. We're moving on.
Yeah. So there is again, like the term self-awareness comes to mind because it's clear that the filmmakers actively didn't care about those things. And there's a certain part of me that finds that really charming. Because it's almost like it knows what it is. It's not.
Well, yeah, it's a movie that knows its audience, and its audience is children.
Right.
Yes.
And obviously, there are a select few like children's films out there that do a good job at appealing to a younger audience and an older audience. That's not really what this movie's going for, though. No. They know that like this is a movie to like sell toys and sell merchandise and all that good stuff for our buddy Saban. Obviously, that money's not going to paying his actors. We know that because. Three-fifths of the original Power Rangers team is not in this movie because they tried to renegotiate their contracts, and he said, here's a renegotiation, get the fuck out of here.
The door.
Yeah, so in the first season of Power Rangers, those actors were making $500 a week, and the show was making hundreds of millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So they were like, can we have more money? And this movie was actually used as a bargaining chip to keep, because originally all 5 or 6 of the main actors were going to walk. This movie was used as a bargaining chip. They were like, do you want to be in a feature film and make, we're still probably going to underpay you, but you'll get that underpaid movie money instead of underpaid TV money.
Yeah.
So 3 of the actors did get the boot, and then the other one stayed on. And then 3 new actors got to come on and be in the movie. So good for them. Like you said, though, the Red Ranger doesn't have any lines.
Yeah. I mean, those coming back, that was Tommy, Kimberly, and Billy.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I thought so.
Okay. This is not super relevant, but the 3 characters written out, Jason, Trini, and Zach, they got like selected for a teen peace conference or something in like Iceland or somewhere. So they were like, okay, you guys, you have better things to do as civilians than Power Rangers to keep the world safe now. But then in the comics, in the last couple of years, they revealed that that was actually a cover story for those 3 Rangers to become the Omega Rangers and protect the entire galaxy in outer space.
The even better Power Ranger.
they did the Poochie went back to his home planet with the Power Rangers.
Okay, so we're not really going to talk about the 2017 film that much because we already have an episode either released or
releasing soon. Yeah.
But I do want to get the soundbite out of Billy. So, Billy, I reviewed that movie on Letterboxd, and I said, it's not a great movie, but it's still Power Rangers, baby. And you commented, you accidentally wrote the word not in here. So, what are your thoughts on the 2017 Power Rangers film?
Like I said, I only saw it once. I saw it once, but I have very, very fond memories of that viewing experience. It was me and a roommate. This is when I was doing an internship in LA. We were friends, but we weren't terribly close, and we were just kind of chilling on the couch. And I was like, hey, do you want to check out that Power Rangers movie? Because like I've been hearing okay things. He was like, yeah, go ahead, turn it on. And we started at like a base level, and it was just us gradually realizing that we both really liked this movie. And by the end, we were like shouting at the TV and like actively just like participating as if we were at like a screening of Rocky Horror. Granted, I am a little biased. I appreciate that part of my enjoyment of the film was the experience of watching it with a friend, but I think it's better than everyone was expecting it to be. I remember when they announced it and it came out, people had extremely low expectations, and it's all right.
Yeah, I think that was our general consensus as well, that it's all right. How much of your opinion do you think was influenced by like your nostalgia for the 95 movie?
Definitely a good handful. And also, I hate Max Landis, but I have a lot of positive memories with the movie Chronicle. Mm-hmm. And they were kind of like very on the nose, just doing Chronicle, but Power Rangers.
Yeah, we mentioned them.
Yeah, so it was like, it felt like they were pitching me a softball where it's like, this one's for you, Bill. So it was kind of like a perfect storm of things that I enjoyed. Nice. I'm a little biased.
So we'll jump into our rating of this film soon, but do you have anything else from your notes you want to share from your viewing experience?
Yeah, a couple things. I liked that Tommy was canonically the coolest person out of the group, because I know he's the leader, but they also had to make sure that he was always the coolest one on screen. He has his ponytail and his earring, and when they're skydiving, he's the only one who also gets a snowboard.
Did we ever come to a decision on, do we think they actually did the skydiving sequence or not?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, someone did skydiving. Like, someone jumped out of those planes. I don't know if it was the actor.
Tom Cruise, eat your heart out.
Yeah, there's a couple shots in the skydiving sequence where, like, you're, like, really close to them while they're skydiving, and, like, it's showing, like, most of their face.
Yes.
And I would feel like if it wasn't actually the actors doing it, they would completely shoot around that, right? You'd do, like, mega wides while they're doing the skydiving. And it's not like on, like, a soundstage or anything like that. You know, they didn't have that technology yet.
And they're all physically fit people. I believe if they did.
Well, yeah, when they transition to the rollerblade sequence, they're pretty good at rollerblading.
Yeah.
Rollerblading, yeah.
Yeah, doing parkour and rollerblading simultaneously. That, and then some of the designs I felt were scarier than I remember. Like, I'm surprised that I wasn't more scared of this movie, because I was a scaredy cat when I was a kid. Like you said, the hand that that holds Ivan Ooze's egg, it looks like it's right from Alien.
The first time we see Lord Zed is awesome.
I was right about to say,
he's like legit scary looking, and you notice that his brain is like hanging out like
muscles.
Yeah,
and it was gross. But there was weird sexual tension between Ivan Ooze and Rita Repulsa that was weird. Yeah, she's immediately like, "Oh, a real man."
I'm sure there's some deleted scenes that show the rest of that.
That, and what was it? The ninja outfits go hard when they're on the alien planet. I thought those were awesome. Ivan Ooze was really smart, because Ooze would absolutely take off as a trend in the 90s, because they were all about those toys and knickknacks that were about like, well, it's so gross.
We were talking about that. We weren't sure if they turned Ooze into like an actual product.
They should have
to sell. Yeah. If they didn't, missed opportunity.
I could 100% absolutely see that taking off. And just the fact, like, how 90s this movie is. I mean, that's part of the charm for it. I was born in 97, so I don't have a ton of memories of the 90s, very, very few. But this movie, like, it opens with skydive, like, extreme sports, and it ends with... the ending is the most 90s, where it's, like, Van Halen screaming, and there's fireworks and pyrotechnics that spell out, "Thank you, Power Rangers." And he's like, what does he say? He's like, "Hey, anything's possible," to the kid. This movie is like a shot of like the 90s distilled into one film. The excess, the extreme sports, the campiness, just the whole American culture.
Yeah, just the raw optimism of pre 9/11 America.
Exactly.
Take me back.
So it's kind of refreshing in that way.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, watching this after watching so many movies for this podcast, this is such a palate cleanser for me. Like, a lot of times I have to sit and watch a movie and then come up with reasons why I love or hate it, and I just don't have strong feelings about the film.
Yeah, I
This
noticed
movie-
you spent a lot less time scrolling TikTok watching this movie, which is huge.
Yeah, when we were watching Attack of the Clones or doing our Star Wars episodes later this week, I was like, I barely saw the movie.
That one's rough. That one is rough.
But this one, yeah, it was such an easy watch. It was something where I don't have to struggle to think of a million reasons why it's awesome. But, you know, I do have to struggle to come up with an objective rating for it, which is going to lead us to our next segment. So what we do on this show is we argue whether this is overrated or underrated. But first we have to determine how we think it's rated. So it's not our ratings, it's what we think the general public thinks of this film. To give you some context, like I said before, 32% on Rotten Tomatoes, 4.4 out of 10 on Metacritic, and then Roger Ebert gave this half a star, which is the lowest he could possibly give. Wait, I want to read that review.
That tracks, though.
As close as you can get to absolutely nothing and still have a product to project on the screen, comparing it to synthetic foods and brightly marketed packaging with no nutritional content.
I don't disagree with him.
You know what? He's not wrong.
He isn't wrong. I love it, but he is not incorrect in that assessment. Thinking about like the taste of movie watchers nowadays and just general people who watch movies, I think this sits at like a comfortable 5. I think even if you're not familiar with the Power Rangers, like I said, there's this kind of distillation of the 90s and pre-9/11 American optimism and excess and fun in there that even if you're not familiar with the franchise, you can still get enjoyment out of that, get enjoyment out of the campiness, out of Ivan Ooze, who is giving an all-timer performance. My God. I scrolled through that guy's IMDb. He's not in much. He was in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
He's so good. And then,
Nothing.
Yeah, you don't see him much.
This, and then more nothing. He's alive.
Yeah,
But it's just not.
I know. When we were watching the screening, I was like, has this guy been in anything else? And Jason was like, no, he died like right after this movie came out.
I was definitely mixing him up with Bison from the Street Fighter.
Street
Rob
Fighter.
Julie, yeah.
Shout out to our Street Fighter episode for...
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, it's on the feed. I'm going to go with a 4. I think we're rating it on a curve a little bit here because we really like the movie. I think 4 is a little bit more accurate for what people actually think of it.
Yeah, it's just hard to say because I think Power Rangers has a very small but loyal fandom.
Yeah, people who like Power Rangers really fucking like Power Rangers.
Yeah, and it's keeping these actors fed to this day.
Yeah.
They go to Comic-Con, they sell 1,000 autographs and take 500 pictures, and then that's their bread for the next 6 months.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to Jason David Frank who plays Tommy. He died last year, right?
2022.
Yeah.
That guy went to like every convention you could possibly imagine.
Like no one had a bad word to say about him.
Yeah, that guy took all of the photos. He had all of the autographs. That dude was absolutely grinding out there on the convention circuit.
And he was an MMA fighter too.
Yeah, and
he walked the walk.
It's always interesting to look at those actors that are known for like one like specific like fandom thing, and then they just try to kind of like ride that wave. And a lot of the actors that are in Power Rangers fall under that umbrella. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's always it's an interesting thing to look at. I mean, I'm guessing do all the other like main cast Rangers, do they go to conventions and stuff like that?
Yeah, pretty much everyone from this movie does the conventions.
Yeah, because I know the actor, what's his name, David something. He played Billy.
David Yost.
Yeah, he came out with a pretty sad story recently because he was like bullied because he was gay. So like there are a couple of them that are still floating around in the zeitgeist, which I always find is impressive because growing up watching this movie, I always felt like I was in like a little bubble. I had friends who liked Power Rangers, but they liked the TV show and not necessarily this specific movie. And then like the internet became like a more centralized amalgamation of blobs. And I found people like this who actually have watched the movie and like it.
This movie would be a really interesting test if it came out today, like how people would think of it. If the 2017 Power Rangers was like this, like it was much more colorful and campy and laid back and like faster paced, and it wasn't like, melodramatic and trying to be more serious and grounded with its characters, would that have performed better with audiences? It's tough to say.
During a previous part of this conversation, like movies that came to mind were the Sonic the Hedgehog movies, the Mario movie, where it's like, these aren't good movies. I like both of those movies, so I'm not hating, but they're not good movies. They're not Scorsese, they're not high art, and they're not trying to be. I think both of those two movies are smarter than Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but there are ride or dies for the Sonic movies. There are ride or dies for that one Mario.
Nah, but you know what those movies do is they make money.
Yeah.
Right? And that's the reason why there is not a Power Rangers 2. The reason why there's not a sequel to the 2017 film is that movie didn't make enough money. That is the number one reason. It has nothing to do with film quality.
Yeah.
Films do not get sequels because they're good. They get sequels because they make money. And this is a series that has, like you said, a dedicated fan base, but they did a reboot of it and it didn't make any money. It's something they need to think about if they ever decide to do another one of these films. Is at the very, very baseline, you got to make a film that like the fans are going to enjoy, because if the fans don't show up, like ain't nobody showing up. You're not pulling in new fans of the Power Rangers franchise in the 2020s. It's just something they need to be cognizant of. It's something that like always irks me about that 2017 film, is that like they went for something they didn't need to go for. Like playing it safe is like, I mean, look at like Force Awakens, for example. Like just fucking play it safe with your rebooted franchise. Like, go with the formula that you know is going to work.
People like dumb fun. People like callbacks to the original source material. People like, hey, I remember that. That's like 90% of what makes money in Hollywood right now. So I think if this did come out now, I think people would like it. I think it would make a lot of money. I don't think it's objectively a good movie, which makes it hard to rate. I would say my rating is like a 5. I think I'm being charitable by giving it a 5.
Jason also gave it a 5. But that was out of 5.
Yeah.
Oh, out of 10. I would say 5 out of 10. I think I'm being charitable. I think, like I said, like the script is like nothing. There's not character growth. It's not a movie, but it is, what does Scorsese say? Roller coaster movie.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah, I love it. I agree with the ballpark for where you guys are at about how other people view the film, a 4 to a 5. So we'll say it's a 4.5 out of 10.
It's good.
Dylan, you have the job of arguing that it's overrated, which means you think that this movie is worse than a 4.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
What you got?
Listen, I'm going to say something that is one of the worst things that anyone can say in a podcast where they're doing like movie conversations. And this is a movie that was made for the fans, okay? For better or for worse, this is a movie for Power Rangers fans. And because of that, it's not a very good movie just on its own, right? It's very fast-paced, which means there's not a lot of like setup to what's happening here. You don't learn about who these characters are. When you see scrolling text at the beginning of a movie, unless it's a Star Wars film, it's probably not a good thing, okay? And even in a lot of the Star Wars films, it's not a good thing. Shout out to Rise of Skywalker. Same thing as, it's the same as like narration. Like if you need to like front load your story so people are like aware of what's happening, it means like you didn't write a very good script for like new people to watch the film. Like we were saying before, like the Power Rangers, like they don't really go through many like issues in this film. They're kind of just like on rails through the plot. I think a lot of the stuff that happens back on Earth is like kind of boring. I thought it was boring when I was a kid too. I know why they have that part of the movie in there is because it's a movie that's going to be watched by a bunch of kids. So you put a younger character in the movie so it's like an audience avatar, right? And that's before we get into like other elements that like make it not a very good movie, like the bad CGI. And, the fight sequences are like over the top and campy. It is the ultimate movie of like, if you're in, you're like 100% in. And if you're even like a little bit out, you're out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how this movie is. And to some extent, maybe some people could see it as like a so bad it's good type thing. I think that if you're watching this film with people that really enjoy the Power Rangers, I think some of that could kind of like rub off on those people. I forget, was John watching it with us when you watched it? Yeah. Like, he seemed to be having a good time, and he's not like a big Power Rangers guy. But if you're trying to look at it objectively, it's not a good movie that we've kind of like talked ourselves into being a really good movie because of like nostalgia goggles. It's the ultimate nostalgia goggles. I realize that I will never be able to look at this movie objectively. It's perfectly okay, but in that case, it definitely makes it overrated.
Billy, we didn't even ask you if you want to argue for overrated or underrated, but what are your thoughts?
I might say underrated. I think I would argue underrated. Like I said previously, I think if if this were exposed to more people today, I think more people than not would enjoy it. Not that it's a great movie on its own accord, but I think it's a very enjoyable movie. It's very funny. There were multiple parts where I was laughing out loud, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not on purpose. Ivan Ooze is genuinely just so fun to watch. He has so many iconic lines that like my sister and I would quote to each other all the time growing up. Just absolutely hamming it up, having a blast. It looks like everyone's kind of hamming it up and having a blast. And I think there's a lot of fun to be had here, even if it moves at a breakneck pace at the expense of its character depth or its plot depth. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have to make the argument that it's underrated. I wrote greatest cinematic villain of all time,
Yes.
like we've already said. Costumes look great. Yeah, by the way, the costumes look really good. Like in the Japanese show that the TV show was basing it off of, it was like spandex suits. Here they clearly incorporated like some plastic, some metal. They designed it up quite a bit more, but it's not over-designed like I think the 2017 Power Rangers movie suits are.
Except for Tommy's shoulder pads. Those kind of look like they're made out of the same like acoustical foam we have in the studio here. They're pretty floppy.
Oh, they're way worse in the show.
But he needs them because he's canonically the coolest one out of all of them.
Exactly.
He has to have them.
There's a couple of times in the show and the comics where he can transfer the, it's called his shield, to other Rangers, and he'll do that to protect them.
The shoulder pads.
Yeah, the shoulder pads. Costumes look great, great soundtrack, good action, flies by, makes you believe you could be a Power Ranger. A perfect film. And I'm not really sure what else needs to be said. I'm trying to remember what you just said in your overrated argument. What was the last thing you said?
I mean, the overrated argument could be like pull up any movie critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, look at people who are not directly tied to this franchise at an emotional level,
Right.
and see what they think of this movie.
Those people are wrong. And I'm not just saying that because I have an emotional tie to this movie. I'm saying that as my purest film critic self who has seen a lot of movies. You know, we've had this podcast for a while. I know how to look at movies, and all those people are incorrect.
Well, yeah. I appreciate you sticking to it.
You're nitpicking and biased. I win.
Exactly.
I'm definitely not brainwashed. That's how you know he's not brainwashed.
You know, you said that the scenes with the kid were kind of boring, but I think they were great. And to this movie's credit, like, I haven't heard stories about that kid being bullied for participating in this, unlike Jake Lloyd, unlike Edward Furlong.
That kid has not gone to prison for an extended period of time.
As far as I know, he is not.
Yeah.
Tennessee, we look him up, and he's like a mass murderer.
Oh, God.
Yeah, nobody look it up, please.
Don't Google it, please.
I mean, it's so much fun to watch. I know we didn't have a control person here. Maybe we should have, but I kind of thought it would be fun to just have three people who are clearly obsessed with this movie. I have seen this movie with like a person who had no ties to this franchise. It was my roommate in college, and she was like, yeah, it was pretty good.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you look at them and you're like, you love it, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, please don't hurt me.
He said teenagers. He made a funny face.
Yeah.
Oh, there was one part I wanted to mention before we wrap up that, like we said, Ivan Ooze goes and he like depowers Zordon. He like trashes the place, destroys a bunch of stuff. He brings a flute and he says, "It's time to pay the piper." And he goes, and then he just starts zapping stuff, which we see throughout the film. He does not need that flute to zap stuff.
Right.
He can just do that. Did he bring that flute just to make that joke?
I think she did.
He's a prop master.
Prop comedian Ivan Ooze.
Well, he talks about how he's a master of disguise. Well, so
Yeah.
Never.
he apparently just has
once.
he just has like a trunk of like props and like costumes that he can like switch into.
Carrot Top and Ivan Ooze hanging out.
It's so interesting because he can, like, we see up front, he turns into a security guard at the construction yard because they're like, we're looking for a morphological being.
And it's not a costume. He just like shapeshifts
He shapes
into the
like
other guy.
he's like a T-1000. He just turns into him from his ooze form. And then later, when he transforms into the ooze salesman is just him in a wizard disguise.
In a bad wizard
He
costume.
could have looked like anything.
They just some powder on his face and a very bad wig.
Yeah, so he's great. A moment that I wanted to bring up before we close, and this will help with my underrated argument, but the ultimate way that the Power Rangers defeat Ivan Ooze is they, in their Megazord, they're fighting him, and he's also combined with his Zords. So there are these giant mechs fighting in space, and they're like, okay, this is our last resort. And they hit this, they break the glass of this button that you can only use in case of emergencies, and they slam it. And the button causes the Megazord to kick Ivan Ooze in the nuts and send him flying
and
off
his
into
metal
a
nuts.
comet. Yeah. You see his eyes bug out, and he goes, oh, and then he flies back into a comet that they mentioned was coming once earlier in the movie.
Yeah.
And the comet...
They had to set up this comet that was coming by the planet.
Oh yeah, there's a comet by the way. Let's kill him that way. To space.
I just, like, you can imagine this movie. It's just been written by, like, 5-year-olds. They're like, you know, it'd be so fucking cool. They're just like a comet comes by.
Those 5-year-olds were right, and the film critics were wrong. This is the perfect movie.
Sorry, Roger Ebert.
End of my argument. Rest in peace. Sorry that you were wrong about this. Cool. So now is the part where we just kind of say what our real feelings are towards this. Did our arguments sway anyone? Dylan, underrated or overrated?
It's kind of tough to say because we haven't really talked much about, like, what the lasting legacy of this film was exactly, because obviously it took them 20 plus years to make another, like, major Power Rangers film.
Well, they released a movie shortly after this, the Power Rangers Turbo.
Turbo, yeah.
Did that get, like, a wide release in theaters?
Yeah.
And I'm guessing it didn't make nearly
It was
the money.
never on my radar. I have no idea.
Yeah, much smaller. I don't know if the budget was smaller, but that movie did take place in continuity with the show. So I don't think it got, like, the big budget glow up that this one did.
So it's tough to say because, yeah, the show has, like, lasted all of these years with its own, like, personal fandom attached to it. But when it comes to, like wider, like, popularity, not really. It's kind of like this movie happened. Like, if you just asked like a casual movie fan or like a nerdy person, they would probably mention the 90s film, and then they would mention the 2017 film, and they'd be like, I assume not much happened in between. So it's tricky to call it overrated if there's not much lasting legacy that came out of this movie. So it depends on, like, which angle you attack it at. If you're going at the movie itself, or if you're looking at the movie in, like, you know, the macro sense of, you know, how this, like, helped push the Power Rangers brand forward. It sounded like it made one man very, very wealthy. So good for him. It's tough to parse, like, either way here, honestly.
I had the luxury of pretty much just speaking my mind. I wouldn't say that personally I'm like, this is underrated masterpiece. Like, but I do feel like more people should check it out because it is fun. I had a great time watching it, even with my own biases. I think even with my own personal inclination towards the movie, if you checked this out with no knowledge of the Power Rangers outside of they're a thing, I think you could have a lot of fun with this movie. And I think Ivan Ooze alone is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, I think you could put this movie in very esteemed company with other weird, campy 90s films of popular IPs. So Super Mario Bros., Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Power Rangers.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that is good company. Like, those are all really fun movies to watch. I'll let the nostalgia goggles guide me and say that this is an underrated masterpiece. I think there are a lot of people I could show this to, and they would probably like it and have fun, like you said. But I think if they're watching it with me or with either of you, and we're, like, hyping it up as we're watching it, then I think we could really get more people on board. So maybe that should be a future goal of ours, is to revive this franchise.
Should we do what Red Letter Media did with the Star Wars Holiday Special and make, like, a shitload of DVD copies of it and just mail it out to random people?
Maybe we should, because, you know, after we boost that one copy of it on YouTube, maybe it'll get taken down. So we should probably preserve it while we can.
I actually may do that after this podcast. Just go to one of those, like, YouTube to MP4 converter websites and just download it.
Make sure you have it, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say that this is definitely underrated. I mean, come on. It's got such low critical ratings, and it's a little undeserved how much these critics hate it. Like I said, they're wrong. So yeah, that's my final thoughts. Does anyone else have anything they want to add?
I just wrote down, like, moments and lines that I thought were cool.
Yeah, you can read some. That'll lead us out.
Ivan Ooze says in a very funny voice when he spawns in a bunch of jelly people, he's like, "Meet my kids," in like a weird southern accent. He says, while staring directly into the camera, "Welcome to my nightmare," which is iconic line. There's a song that plays during a fight sequence that is just, "Action boy now, action girl now." Thought that was fantastic. Time to pay the piper. Oh, they're in the parking garage, and the Yellow Ranger says, "Activating power beam," and then it's just a flashlight on their helmet.
And it like kind of illuminates like the area in front of
It
them.
really does anything. It's the power beam. This is a real life cartoon.
There's a great point at like near the end of the movie where they try to have this emotional moment where Zordon dies, and like Amy Jo Johnson is trying so hard to be like emotional in the scene, and we couldn't stop laughing while watching this moment. It's like, oh, that's right, these people are not good actors, and it kind of makes it better because of it.
Yeah, my last note that I have is that like 90% of the dialogue is ADR. Like, why is it dubbed over so much? Because
In true Power Rangers fashion.
yeah, because like in the original, they're dubbing over Japanese actors, but like that wasn't the case here. So, but like, it's like not like, was the production sound that bad, or like was it bad? Like you said, are they not great actors? Did they just
Yeah, because
bad
ADR,
line reading?
yeah, excessive ADR usually comes from script rewrites in post, or the lines weren't good enough when they shot it on location, so they just had to do it in post.
Yeah, because it matches their lips. It's like they're on screen, and it sounds like
Yeah, so it's probably just a delivery thing.
My guess is that, they had to go in to read lines for when they're in their suits anyway. And the director was probably like, while you're here, just read the script in its entirety.
I'd believe it.
Yeah, that would be my guess. But yeah, that's going to be it for our Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie podcast. Billy, where can people find you? What are you up to?
Yeah, I am the classic Bill on pretty much everything. I'm making some YouTube videos lately. I'm working on one right now that's going to be pretty long. It's my favorite game from every year since I was born.
Wow.
So it's going to be a long boy. I'm over 21 pages in the script right now. But so yeah, subscribe to me on YouTube, I guess.
That's cool. I'll have to check you out.
Yeah, that sounds really fun. And for us here at the Over Under podcast, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. You can find us on YouTube. Check us out on TikTok before it's banned. We do YouTube Shorts as well. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter.
Check us out on Patreon.
Patreon, if you want to give us money, that would be good too.
Get your episode 24 hours early, and you get your name in the end credits of every episode. Very special.
Yeah. You can also join our Discord if you want to join us in gushing about the movies that we love or trashing movies that we hate.
And if you're curious about what movies we're doing on future episodes, it kind of gives it away in our Discord server because you see our Letterboxd reviews in there.
Yeah.
I got to join that.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to have you.
Totally.
So yeah, that'll be it for us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you at the movies.
Peace.
Bye.
Go Rangers. Go Rangers.